Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we are back in War Thunder and we're looking at the M.B.157, and before I start here, I just want to say it is raining hard outside, so if you hear any background noise I apologise, but unfortunately I'm not a witch doctor or anything like that, I can't make it go away. And also, I am really struggling with a cold, so if the audio quality isn't the best in this video, well, you know, hopefully the points hit home about the aircraft. Anyway, we're having a look at the M.B.157. It is another French aircraft, rank 3, battle rating 3.7. You will find it in the tree just after the D520, and it is the last real French vehicle that you'll get in rank 3, which leads on to the VB-10C1 in rank 4. If we look at the armor on this machine, it actually has a decent amount with 10mm just after the engine, as you can see here, and after the oil cooling system. It also has a little box here, which I'm guessing is a radio of some sort, because when I look here, there isn't anything. So I'm guessing it's just a little radio or something, you know, 3mm of thickness. And then we have a head plate, which is 10mm. Nothing in the front, which is sad, so head-ons are going to be an issue. And also, what you'll find a lot of the time is people will shoot you in the front, and they'll actually hit this oil system. So the plate itself doesn't actually help because of how it's angled, which is kind of annoying. It does have the Gnome Roan 14R 14 cylinder. You'll be used to it by now. You either get the Hispano Suiza or the Gnome Roan on these machines, and you also get two 20mm Hispano 404s, one in each wing, with 120 rounds of ammunition. So you have 60 per gun, which isn't great, but you know, it does mean you can get at least a few kills before you have to go back to the base. So when we look at this machine, is it better to just get the gun upgrades, or is it better just to get the flight performance upgrades? Well, one of the things about the default belt is that 2 of the rounds are pretty much useless if we're coming to killing power, and with 120 rounds you want to try and maximize the amount of rounds which actually do something. Now, if you decide to go for the offensive 20mm first, you're gonna have to be comfortable using stealth, because in stealth all of the rounds are useful. In tracer, 2 rounds are pretty useless. In ground targets, 4 rounds are not that great. And then in universal, about 2 rounds, 2.5 rounds are useful. So instead of prioritizing the belts, I think it's much better to get the upgrades, even though you're still going to struggle against certain machines such as the P47 Premium. You should do a hell of a lot better against stuff like BF-109s and Focke-Wulfs if you get those upgrades, and then work on the weaponry. Unfortunately, this thing doesn't get any secondary armaments, making it a little bit more useful, but you know what, we'll talk about all of that performance stuff in the gameplay, so let's get into it. So before I get into a full match, I want to talk about an issue that I'm running into with a lot of these French aircraft, and that is basically the premium P47. Now, for the Germans, they get a lower BR P47 than the Americans. It is a 3.7, and the reason for this is because it doesn't have the upgrades or certain upgrades that the American ones get. Now, the issue with this is it does get all of the upgrades which make the American P47 good. And what happens is it gets an airspawn, it has a ridiculous amount of 50 cals, it is fast at speed, it locks up hard at speed, but it's still fast, and it has that one good turn. And it outclasses every single damn French aircraft I have, in every way. And this is exemplified with the M.B.157, where you are trying to fight like a P47, but you have an airfield spawn, and you don't have the ammunition, so you can't stay in the air as long as a P47. So you end up in the shitty scenario where you're the guy who has to deal with the assholes who are flying these things. And do I blame them? No, not really. Are they still assholes? Yes. There is always one or two of them in every single match, abusing a plane, which is pretty good compared to everything else it fights. And I talked about this when I talked about the P-47N. There is no reason for this machine to get an air spawn, especially against the French and its allies, because there is nothing that can catch it at its altitude. Nothing can get up there in time. And it doesn't matter about the skill of pilots. The statistics on the premiums don't matter because anybody can fly them. This is the argument that is trotted out against it. The fact that the stats show that P-47 pilots of captured aircraft don't do really well. I don't care, because this isn't a stat issue. This is an issue that this plane is obviously a problem, and then in the hands of any player who is slightly skilled, it is going to decimate the whole team, which is exactly what happened in this match, and exactly what happened in about 5 others as I was playing this and spading it. It is incessantly annoying to see these things take over a game. But anyway, let's get on to an actual match. So let's actually get into some gameplay of the M.B.157. Now, if I was going to do a quick summary of what this plane feels like, or basically what it is if any of you were able to get the gift vehicle, which was the P-43 Lancer for the Americans, that's basically what it is with worse guns. Now, if you weren't able to get the P-43, the way I would describe the P-43 is that it is a worse P-47. So basically, what you're getting out of the M.B.157 is a worse P-47. It has decent engine power, not as good as the P-47, decent dive, arguably the same as a P-47, worse guns by a lot than the P-47, and pretty much worse climb rate, because you don't spawn in the air. So, since you go up against the majority Focke-Wulfs, BF-109s and P-47s, you're left in a situation where you're pretty much outclassed every single time that you fly the aircraft. I've never had a match where I've faced anything which isn't German. So, and this is out of about 20 matches with this aircraft. So I can't really comment on if it does well against Japan, or if it does well in an alternate history match, because I just don't know. So let's get into some of the specifics. First of all, the engine, the Nomron, does have a tendency to overheat quite a lot, and it will do this below 400 kilometers an hour at basically after 2 minutes of wepping. If you knock it back to 100, then it does stop overheating, which is nice, but even over 400 kilometers an hour, it will take longer to overheat, but it still will overheat in the end. So this is an engine which likes to kill itself quite easily on any map that you find yourself, which is very sad, to be honest. Because you only have 120 rounds of cannon ammo, that basically means you have to make every shot count, and with the War Thunder team talking about how sparking had pretty much gone their side, the phenomenon of shooting your guns and then nothing happening, I thought for the French tree, that's great. That basically means that a lot of these guns with low ammunition counts are going to be more useful. Well, with this machine, I found out that sparking still does exist. If it isn't client-side, it is server-side, or if it isn't server-side, it is client-side, and that means that you can shoot aircraft with these guns, and, well, they just don't die, and it's really annoying. Because it is an interesting aircraft, in the dive it locks up after about 650 kilometers an hour. Now, the lockup isn't actually too harsh on this machine, but I'd say it's actually worse than on something like a VG-33. Because it's an all-metal plane, and because it has 2 heavy guns in the wings and, a nice little bit of fuel on it, it means that it dives really well. the question is, does it dive better than the P-47, which is going to be above you? No, it doesn't. The P-47 is going to be able to outdive you and kill you. Will it outdive a Focke-Wulf? I think the answer is maybe. I'm not exactly sure. I've had some times where I've been able to dive after a Focke-Wulf, and sometimes a Focke-Wulf diving after me. Does it outdive a BF-109? Yes. Unless you get unlucky and get something like a G6. Now, I find myself at the BR of 3.7 in this aircraft, getting into a lot of 4.7 games. And I'm not exactly sure why this is, or if there's anything I can do to solve it, but I really doubt it. So, the problems at this plane were exemplified by the fact I was facing stuff like BF-109 G6s and the like, and having P-47Ns on my team. It was a weird scenario, we'll just say that. But anyway, because the guns, you only have 120 rounds, you have to use short bursts, you have to be accurate. In my case, that means setting my convergence to something like 300 or 200, so I can get close to an aircraft and hit them in very short bursts. I also use universal generally, and if I'm struggling with it, like getting a lot of sparks, then I switch to stealth, where I know I can get a guaranteed one-hit kill. And if these lands round, they will one-hit kill enemies, which is very, very satisfying because you technically have two 20mm rounds plunging into a plane and destroying it. Overheating the guns is not an issue, because you don't have enough rounds to do it. And when it comes to the secondary battle part, so what do I mean about that? So you have the initial battle, where you either win the game or lose the game generally, and that is where fighters versus fighters. You have the first few engagements where whichever team comes on top generally just wipes the battle. Now, with that said, one of the things that can bring back a battle for a team is bombers and attackers when they go after like pillboxes and bases. Sometimes it's nice to have ordnance on a fighter in order to go after ground targets, and sometimes it's nice to have enough ammunition to do that as well. The M.B.157 doesn't have either, so you have to use it as an interceptor. Oh, and by the way, if you think this thing is going to go after bombers, let me tell you the bombers you run into. First of all, I have no idea what this Focke-Wulf is doing. He either disconnected or something like that. It's basically a free kill, so don't take anything out of it. See, easy as pie. Anyway, so the only bombers that the Germans run at this time for an interceptor like yourself to kill are BV-238s. So your two biggest issues are the P-47 and the BV-238. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Don't you just love the BV? Don't you just love the fact it was added to the game, and the fact that if there's 4 of them, they can end a match whenever they feel like? Great design. And you're supposed to deal with them. You have 120 rounds. 120 rounds will not kill a BV, and he will knock your engine out with 1 hit. And that is if you even get up to him. Now, I got annoyed here, because I set this BF-109 up to get killed by the P-47, and as you can see, he didn't kill him. This was after a long night of frustration, trying to do anything in this machine of note, and all I found myself doing was my team getting wiped, and me just sat there going, well, I climbed. Against the Italians, the plane actually does a pretty good job. It does outdive stuff like the C205 and the G55s if you are unlucky to get into them. When it comes to the turn, you can actually outturn them. When it comes to ammunition, well, it's MG151s versus Hispanos with no rounds, so therefore, yeah, you're kind of out of luck in that department. But it is quite a fun fight. The major issues, as I've said, are 2 premium aircraft, which one should be at a higher BR, and the other shouldn't exist. So, yeah. It's unfortunate, unfortunately. The Intercept fighter, which is designed to intercept bombers, doesn't get an air spawn like other Intercept fighters. it doesn't have enough ammunition to kill bombers that it's supposed to, so therefore you are relegated to killing fighters. And at the end of the day, if your team gets wiped and there's 5 enemy fighters left, then yeah, maybe you can do something. But you still can't win. I've also found this thing where I've been criticalling aircraft with these guns, and nothing seems to happen, so you'll see it in a bit against this BF-109. It will say that I've critted its tail, but it doesn't seem to care, and he just flies on normally, and it's incredibly annoying. Also, because people can duck, dip, and dive, then they can just get away from your guns, and you only have 120 rounds. There you go, there's the critical. Tail is criticaled. This plane didn't care. What is that about? If I get my tail criticaled, I can hardly move. That guy's flipping, dipping and diving and dicking everywhere. But as you can probably tell, it's been incredibly frustrating for me to fly this aircraft, because it is everything that I dislike when it comes to what my playstyle, basically. I like energy fighters who are able to keep up their speed at high altitudes and use their ammunition to survive a battle, and then go after the miscreants at the end, mopping up. This cannot do that. In ammunition, in performance, in anything. It has nothing over the enemy. It has no performance or anything. And I would say it needs to get a lower BR. I would even put this at 3.0. And yes, it will still fight P-47s, but at least sometimes it won't. And those will be glorious days. Thank God. It's much better than just getting outperformed constantly. I'll see you next time.